Hi, my name is Mackenzie, and fun fact about me, I am in constant pain. Not just from my severe scoliosis, but from reading and perceiving information, including the arrest of YouTuber and life coach Ruby Franke. This happened on August 30th, a little over a month ago, and I'm glad I waited to put this video out because a lot has happened since then. Ruby's business partner Jodi Hildebrandt was also arrested, and both were charged with 6 felony counts of aggravated child abuse, and they are currently being held without bail. This all came from a 911 call made by a neighbor when a little boy showed up to his door begging for food and water. This call is devastating to listen to. The neighbor falls apart on the phone when he tries to describe the state that the boy is in. He was emaciated, bound with rope, and had other signs of physical abuse. Soon after, Ruby's daughter was also found in the same horrific condition, and both were immediately rushed to the hospital. I'm just so proud of that kid for having the bravery and courage to escape that hell house. He absolutely saved his and his sister's life. So while the 2 youngest children are in the custody of the state, the 2 older children that still lived with Ruby are now in the custody of Sherry, her oldest daughter, who has since moved out of the home. They are not with their father, Kevin, and that is on purpose. We will get into his role in all of this later. Ruby started out as your typical Mormon mommy Utah vlogger, following her kids around with a camera, showing every single aspect of their lives, completely disregarding their privacy and boundaries, and to her own admission, making millions off of this. Her channel 8 Passengers was started in 2015 and lasted 8 years until it was deactivated earlier this year before her arrest. So during the better part of a decade, her family received more than 2.5 million subscribers. Even though their YouTube channel is now gone, there's so much content still floating around out there because people have been making videos about the Frankes for years. This is due to their extreme and seemingly abusive parenting styles. By 2020, Ruby and Kevin were receiving a lot of backlash for how they chose to discipline their kids and showing this all on camera. They are big fans of corporal punishment and anything that could cause their children physical or emotional pain. This included making them sleep on the floor, making them do push-ups, not allowing the use of any technology, canceling Christmas presents, and withholding food.
My bedroom was taken away for 7 months and then you give it back like a couple weeks ago.
I don't think our viewers know that.
You've been sleeping on a beanbag.
I've been sleeping on a beanbag since October.
Do you think it's funny? Because
and then I walk out.
If you think it's funny, then that was 7 months ago. Maybe you need longer without a bedroom. Put them in your pockets so you can take them down to the hamper and drop and give me 10. Shape your hands forward. There you go. 1, 2, down further. Bring your butt down. Ooh. We took the phone away from Abby, and you may never get the phone back.
Probably not.
The 2 youngest are showing long patterns of selfishness. They have been showing their unwillingness to repent, their unwillingness to feel sorrow over some pretty egregious choices that they've made. So Kevin and I have decided that we are going to give the gift of truth to them this year for Christmas. We are going to give them the gift of boundaries, and we're going to give them the gift of repentance. And we told them that this year they are not going to be visited by Santa. Christmas morning, their 4 older siblings will be getting Christmas presents to open, and that they will have the gift of love from their dad and I, because we want them to really have a visceral experience that hits them. I was really hoping that like keeping them home from school and wiping the floorboards would like really bring pain. They haven't affected them. It's because they're so numb. And so the more numb your child is, the bigger the outcome. They need to wake them up. You're not going to push a boulder with just your hands. You need some real leverage. I expressed to them that I love your soul more than anything in this world.
The world has these definitions of what love, tenderness look like. I watch all these Christmas shows that I used to just love because I feel all warm and fuzzy. And this year I watch them and I'm like, oh, gross. Because warm and fuzzy in the show was always about at the end, the kid just got whatever they wanted. The greatest gift that I could have received, going back to my experiences that I shared as a child, would have been an outcome, a Christmas just like the one Ruby described, where I had all of those fears and all of those distractions taken away, and I was forced to come face to face with the fears that I had. That would have been loving. That would have been tender.
I told the kids, I said, I'm not even gonna let you eat breakfast until you get your chores done. I'm only gonna say it one more time, and then you're gonna lose the privilege to eat dinner.
Can you give me some breakfast? I don't need food.
Stop crying or I'm gonna have you go upstairs and you won't have any breakfast. I know that her teacher is uncomfortable with her being hungry and not having lunch, and it would ease her discomfort if I came to the school with a lunch. Eve is responsible for making her lunches in the morning, and she actually told me she did pack a lunch. So the natural outcome is she's just going to need to be hungry. Hopefully nobody gives her food and nobody steps in and gives her a lunch.
My daughter was saying her prayers. Eve, she was 6 years old at the time, and she was saying her prayers, and she said the cutest thing. I thought it was so cute, and I started laughing. She said, "Dear Heavenly Father, please help me to survive. And I thought it was so cute, and it just took me off guard, and I kind of giggled a little. That was an experience for her, and she melted. She was angry.
So YouTubers start combing through the 8 Passengers channel, and they found a disturbing pattern of abusive parenting tactics. So they made their own videos saying as much. Because of this, the Frankies ended up taking their most controversial videos down and served these YouTubers cease and desist letters like Halloween candy, which obviously did not work out well, or we would not have any of those clips that I just showed you. The internet is forever, and people who make money off the internet should know that, but good try, you assholes. The irony of the overwhelming amount of evidence we have that the Frankies were abusive to their kids is that it was well documented by themselves. They were proud of it. Not only did they think they were doing a good job at parenting, but they thought they were above average parents and wanted the world to know. The world disagreed though. In fact, a petition was started in May of 2020 begging CPS to investigate the Franke home and received almost 18,000 signatures. Just 1 week later, the Popos showed up at their door to do just that. However, after this one short visit, they decided these claims of abuse were unsubstantiated and the case was closed. This allowed the Frankies to feel vindicated that they were not bad parents, and Ruby was left with the impression the officers wanted to parent just like she did. I am not kidding. Ruby said, quote, "They both said they were going to go home and make some changes on how they were parenting." So I was reading a thread on Reddit about this, and apparently this is an obvious tactic by the officers to glean more information from Ruby. So they were asking her a lot of questions as part of their investigation, because that's what they're trained to do. She was like, "Oh my gosh, they're asking me so many questions. They must want to be me." I love being delusional as much as the next girl, but not when it's harming people. This is not fun Delulu. This is evil Delulu. Ruby was already in a state of delusion so deep that not even officers showing up at her door could pull her out of it. So after that encounter with CPS, Ruby Franke saw it not as a lesson for her, but a lesson for the officers. Her and Kevin just wrote the whole thing off as being persecuted and hated because they were speaking the truth. And even though Ruby was usually the one behind the camera, Kevin defended and co-signed all of this behavior from Ruby. And Kevin Franke, as it turns out, was a college professor at, surprise, surprise, BYU. So I perused his reviews on Rate My Professors. He has an overall 2.1 out of 5 stars, which is bad. Out of the total 41 reviews, 28 of them rated him as awful. And these are all well before Ruby's arrest. So these are authentic reviews from students who actually took his class. On June 16th, 2022, this one says, "Kevin is horrible. I cried every day. He's very abusive to his students and we were left traumatized. He had a meltdown last month in front of the class and scolded everyone. I tried to contact the dean, but nothing happened. He screamed and yelled at us for using TikTok and went on a rant. He threw a textbook at me and I'm filing for battery charge." June 9th, abusive, racist, homophobic. May 27th, seems to have a problem with TikTok and will push his beliefs on you more than teaching. If you take him, you'll have a hard time getting in touch, and when you do, don't expect him to be nice. July 23rd, he is very controlling and you can only have the same views that he has or you will be looked down on. Caused me so much stress that I dropped out. May 26th, he took 10 points off my grade because he saw me doing a TikTok dance outside of class. And he said I broke honor code and was promoting pornography. I was only doing the Rolex dance. Wow, I need to rinse my eyes out with holy water for all of the corn that I just saw. And yes, I have to say corn because it's YouTube. I know, I hate it too. Kevin hating TikTok was also a Ruby thing, as you may know her from her infamous meltdown she had once she found out that her daughter's dance team was doing choreography to a TikTok dance.
I'm so angry. I could scream. I said I have a concern about the TikTok dances. I would hope that the principal where my kids go to school, that the standard would be truth, that the standard would be principles, that the standard would be morality. And she says, well, what's moral for you isn't going to be moral for other parents. And I said, it's what's moral according to God. You are not protecting them. You are introducing them to the world. And in the end, each of us will account to God for how we protected kids.
Kevin agreed and defended his wife at a school board meeting.
She was shocked to learn that the entire curriculum for the class was focused on replicating viral dance videos from the social media platform TikTok and dancing to pornographic music without parental notice or consent, thus exposing students to music that celebrates the prostitution and sexual demeaning of women with lyrics like, Quote, so sexual, she was flexible. Professional, hold up, wait a minute, do I see what I think I? Whoa, work that pole, I got the bankroll. I must say I prefer the no clothes. I'm into that, I like women exposed. Sorry, but I had to fold her like a pornography poster. She showed her, end quote.
That's a really sad statement. That's a sad evidence of where we are as a society. That we've removed ourselves from principles of morality, and instead we've tied our wagons to policy. And the students are buying in because it's popular and it's fun. And you know, the reality is, it is condoning and pushing and promoting just sexual lewdness.
Just for context, here's the dance that they were referring to. Kevin and Ruby are not rational people, and they are never wrong, ever, ever, ever.
We got accused of child abuse when we sent Chad to Anasazi. Guess what? The first thing that they did was take a bed away. They don't have beds. So Chad slept on the hard ground for months, and it's, you know, it's run by psychologists and therapists, and if not having a bed was psychologically damaging, then they wouldn't have suggested that.
Not having a bed isn't psychologically damaging because I sent my son to a camp where they also didn't have beds. That's circular reasoning, and Ruby does a lot of it, but we'll get more into that later. Insider reported on the Frankies back in 2020 and said, quote, Kevin said the decision to send Chad away came amid years of physical and emotional damaging behavior that Chad was participating in with his siblings and classmates that ended up getting him suspended from school. Kevin doesn't go into detail about what this damaging behavior is, but what you will learn from watching their content is how often they exaggerate and dramatize every little thing their kids do. So damaging behavior to them is probably not what you think it is. In fact, when Chad gets his bed taken away after getting home from this wilderness camp, he said it was because he pulled a prank on his brother and told him they were going to Disneyland when they weren't. Ruby added that he also let his brother hang from a basketball hoop for a period of time. And now he has no bed or bedroom. You can't torment your siblings, only I can. The crime does not fit the punishment, and this is a consistent theme you will see throughout their videos as well. As far as him getting suspended from high school, I was suspended from high school too, for being late. That's it. You can be suspended for a wide range of behavior, and he was just most likely a typical angry teen that was rebelling against his parents' controlling ways. But this does not occur to Ruby or Kevin. It is not even in the realm of possibility that micromanaging their children is having an adverse effect. So now that we know who Kevin was, where was he during all of this? Well, allegedly he was forced out of his home by Ruby and did not see or speak to his children in over a year, as is admitted by his lawyer. I don't give a shit if Kevin actually knew about the extent of the abuse. That is neglect. You have a legal right to see your children. The fact that Kevin is now trying to gain custody is insane, and I think the state agrees, which is why they're not in his custody right now. Kevin's lawyer argues that he was just trying to save his marriage and just following Ruby's orders. In my opinion, your kids and their well-being should come before your spouse. They are literally your responsibility. Not only that, but he has not changed his ways since those videos we saw just a few years ago. He tried to press charges recently against his oldest daughter, Sherry. He went to his and Ruby's house and saw that the door had been kicked in, so he called the police to report a burglary. They told him, no, your house wasn't robbed, that was us because we served a search warrant and we had to get into the house. Sherry ended up taking the two other kids' belongings, and apparently she took some of Kevin's stuff with her on accident. It was promptly returned to the police and returned to Kevin. But after learning this, Kevin still wanted to press charges.
Is it all there?
Yes. Yeah, explain to me again why this was not robbery.
Because it's a civil issue. It's, you guys are family. She's been in the house before. You haven't been in the house in a year. She had interest in the items. She didn't take them with the intention to deprive you of them. So theft, that's the theft code. We have to prove intent to deprive you of the items. And that wasn't her intent in having them. So the detective sergeant said that we're not going to charge her for anything.
Okay. I'll have to do some more research on that.
You're welcome to do that. If you want to follow up with her, text me yourself.
criminal. When the police told him, no, you can't do that, he threatened to sue them, allegedly. I'm sure he's going through a lot right now, but I don't feel bad for him in the slightest. And he needs to stay the fuck away from them kids. Ruby and Kevin seem to harbor so much hate and anger towards the world and their own children, and I don't personally believe either of them are fit to be parents. As I was doing research for this, I was reminded of Matilda, a movie where she also had shit parents. You know the scene where Danny DeVito is yelling at Matilda? I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong. There's nothing you can do about it.
I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong. And there's nothing you can do about it.
That is the Frankie's parenting style, aka authoritarian parenting. Authoritarian parenting places high expectations on children with little responsiveness. As an authoritarian parent, you focus more on obedience, discipline, control, rather than nurturing your child. Mistakes tend to be punished harshly, and when feedback does occur, it's often negative. Yelling and corporal punishment are also common. Authoritarian parents punish children for failures while ignoring their achievements. They expect the child not to make any mistakes and obey them. The ironic thing about this parenting style is it does not work. The more you want to control your children, the more you are going to lose control. It's a lose-lose situation for everyone involved. You're not going to see the changes you want, and your kids are going to fucking hate you. According to psychologist Marianne Baker, these harsh punishments often lead to the child not really understanding what they did wrong and repeating the behavior. She says it is simply concerned with getting the child to conform to a set of predetermined, often poorly communicated, and ever-changing set of goalposts. So the child is almost doomed to fail. Children make choices with their behavior based on their emotions, and if you don't seek to understand and discuss these emotions, the child ends up storing up a host of resentment and anger at the very least. This next clip is one I think demonstrates this perfectly.
We are going to a movie, so go get on your shoes.
What is it? What?
Does it even matter? If someone asked me if I want to go to a movie, I wouldn't ask, what is it? Run and get your shoes or you're going to not go.
Sorry. Mom, I'm really sorry.
I am not taking Eve, unless you come and give me a huge apology. You come give me a hug and you come say you're sorry. No, again, where I can pay attention. It was not very thankful of you. I was excited and I told you to go get on your shoes and your jacket to see a movie. And you should say, okay, and be grateful. Instead of, well, what movie? Well, I don't know. Let me think about it. That's not very grateful, and I'm not going to take a girl who's not grateful. Can you show some more gratitude? Okay, give me a big hug.
So Ruby tells her daughter they're going to the movies. Her daughter asks, what movie is it? And Ruby flips out. That is what she did wrong. She asked a question. But because this pissed Ruby off for whatever reason, and the #1 unchanging rule in this house is don't piss Ruby off, she made her apologize. There are so many upsetting clips, but this one really grinds my gears because the child clearly did nothing wrong. She references it has to do with being grateful, which is an extremely vague rule on purpose. Ruby made it that way so that she could determine from moment to moment whether she thinks you're acting grateful. This absolutely sets her kids up for failure and makes Ruby think that she's in the right. And it breaks my heart because you can tell her daughter is used to this irrational behavior from her mom. She sees the signs that her mom is upset and immediately starts apologizing even if she doesn't know why. She has learned it is now her job to manage her mother's emotions. That is insane. What does this have to do with Mormonism, Mackenzie? I'm so glad you asked. I would be happy to tell you. It's because I believe the Mormon God is also an authoritarian parent, and here is why. Being raised Mormon, you have very strict rules and strict consequences. Except depending on your leadership, this is also very fluid. So you can have two people who do the same thing, like sleep with their boyfriend. They both go to their bishops. One bishop says, you can't have a temple recommend. I need you to meet with me every week. Can't take the sacrament for a year. You're disfellowshipped. The second bishop says to stop taking the sacrament for a few weeks, pray for forgiveness, and you're good. Just don't do it again. I have seen both of these scenarios with either myself or my friends. It's this fun thing called bishop roulette. You never know what you're gonna get. But that's not God, Mackenzie. Those are just bishops. But hold up, I thought bishops speak for God. They have revelation for their ward members and they have the power of discernment. This magical discernment is what gives the situation nuance. It means whatever policy is in the handbook, you can ignore that if the Spirit tells you to. Bishops do not get disciplined for not following church policy. That's not a thing. They can do whatever they want, dole out whatever punishments they deem necessary, as long as they say they're receiving revelation from God. That is a moving goalpost. That is a God that changes the rules. When there are harsh punishments for innocuous things, like someone touching themselves one time and they lose their recommend, or when there is light punishments for serious things such as assault and they don't lose their recommend and are instead called to be stake president, that is an extremely unclear and confusing set of rules. The Mormon God is not an unchanging God. Never has been, never will be. Although I can't speak for every reason that Ruby ended up as fucked up as she did, Mormon doctrine is absolutely at the root of it. Her and Kevin emulated Mormon God's parenting to a T. To say that the church's teachings were so opposite of the things she preached in her videos is false. Mormon God is a confusing, unpredictable, manipulative, and abusive parent who demands complete control over his children, just like Ruby and Kevin. I'm not a therapist and I know this word is thrown around a lot, but I do believe the Frankies, as well as Jodi Hildebrandt, who we will get to shortly, are narcissists. According to the DSM-5, there are 5 criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. Number 1, grandiose sense of self-importance. Number 2, frequent fantasies about having or deserving success, power, intelligence, beauty, love, self-fulfillment. 3, belief in superiority. 4, need for admiration. 5, entitlement. 6, willingness to exploit others. 7, lack of empathy. 8, frequent envy. And 9, arrogance. I'd say that these people fit the script pretty well as ding ding ding, Mormon God. The need for admiration sticks out to me as the Frankies thought that eating food was a privilege, not a basic human need. And I think a lot of religions, not just Mormonism, teach that their deity is allowing you to breathe and to be alive, and that alone deserves our worship. I don't quite follow the logic, and that is why I'm no longer religious. I don't think I need to be thanking someone every day that they are allowing me to live, aka not killing me, but that's just me. And if you think you've heard some batshit crazy things, just wait till you meet her batshit counterpart, Jodi Hildebrandt. Jodi Hildebrandt is a therapist, was a therapist until she turned over her license shortly after her arrest. And she is the founder of a coaching group / cult called Connections. Jodi's psychopathy goes far back as more of her victims are coming forward, including Adam Steed and her own niece, Jessie. Jessie uses they, them pronouns. I've seen a lot of YouTubers misgender them, so I just wanted to point that out for the comment section to please respect their pronouns. Both Jessie and Adam's story are horrific. Mormon Stories interviewed both of them, but the Adam Steed one was removed, allegedly due to his insane ex-wife, and I don't like calling women insane, but once you hear this story, you'll understand. Huge trigger warning for their interviews. They are both heartbreaking and show the true depravity of Jodi Hildebrandt.
When I chose to leave this cult-like group, Jodi tried to punish me, and she worked through BYU Honor Code Office and legal measures to try to hurt me. And I have the emails between my ex-wife and her planning out all this stuff, talking about what the real issues in our marriage were, and then them evolving that into something drastically different with allegations that would totally destroy your life. And how that evolution happened from what they originally were like is just astounding. I had to come forward because when I heard that they were doing the same thing to those little kids that they did to me to hide their crimes, it was totally predictable. And I knew my records would just completely show the world the truth of how dangerous this lady really is. I never had the courage to talk about this openly because the damage was so bad. After Jodi and my ex-wife got done trying to make me look like a child abuser and a sexual addict and everything else, having been a victim that came forward to change the laws to protect children, and having the insecurities that victims have, the stigma and all that stuff, and Jodi working on me to try to make me look like I was a predator in her final stage when I refused to pay all the money and refused to stay in the group and was so uncomfortable with it. What they did to me, the coordinated attack to create the solution and all this stuff, I have all the documentation as she coaches her through how to make people think that they're coming up with the idea themselves when she's trying to contort people's minds into thinking that there had been abuse and violence.
She saw me as an angry teenager, and so she's like, I could use this. Like, oh, you're angry because you're evil. You're sad because you have so much sin inside of you. Oh, you've kissed girls? Oh my God, you are just Satan himself. And I don't say this hyperbolically. Like, she genuinely literally believed that Satan was working through me. And she literally believed that Jesus was working through her and that she was fighting Satan on a daily basis. But Jodi also was convinced that I was a drug addict. She was convinced I was a sex addict. She was convinced that I had abortions. She would rationalize and validate these types of behaviors through dreams and visions. She would have these dreams that God came to her and told her that I had an abortion. And so no matter what I said, I was a liar. And also she was convinced that every word that came out of my mouth was a lie. And that, gave her rationale to put duct tape on my mouth. And that's why I was always duct taped, because every word I said was a lie. And that needed to be physically reiterated. So if I was at church and I wasn't duct taped and a church leader came in, because this happened, a church leader would come and be like, are you okay? and I would have to just stare at them. Because she also had spies. She had people reporting back to her anything and everything that I did. So if I did talk to someone, she found out somehow. People saw me duct taped. People saw that these things were going on. And other than like the few people that like went to Bishop and being like, hey, something's wrong, no one did anything. I told one of my aunts that the reason she kept me outside in the snow was because she was afraid I was going to murder her in her sleep.
Jessie tried to run away 3 times and even spoke to the police, who did nothing. But thankfully they were successful on a 3rd attempt and made it out alive. But bishops continued recommending members see Jodi, including Adam's bishop. Adam's story is shocking and very damning towards the Mormon church for a few reasons. One, because Jodi would often talk about how she counseled apostles and worked on the LDS addiction recovery program herself. And 2, allegedly General Authority Harold Hillam was working very hard to destroy Adam's life, all because when he was younger, he was SA'd at a Boy Scouts camp and spoke up about it. That's it. The Boy Scouts thing and Adam Steed's story prior to Jodi deserves its own video because there's so much there. Adam has been through literal hell just for talking about what happened to him. Adam was seeing Jodi for his supposed sex addiction, something that is a very common treatment in Utah, including the practice Jodi was previously employed at called LifeStar. Here are some reviews. LifeStar does not employ licensed doctors or therapists, does not use evidence-based or scientific methodologies, is not trauma-informed, and holds extreme views of sexuality that are far outside the mainstream of professionals and regular folks. They pathologize healthy sexual expressions and perpetuate the shame and harm that drives so much unhealthy behavior. Another reads, pathologizing normal human sexuality is dangerous. This company employed Jodi Hildebrandt and probably many others who practice unethical therapy. Although all evidence of Jodi Hildebrandt has been removed from the LifeStar website, I want to note it does seem like they do employ licensed therapists. However, sex addiction therapy is controversial because according to the DSM-5, it doesn't exist. Compulsive sexual behavior is one thing, but not in the way these therapists teach it, especially Mormon therapists like Jodi. Here's her take on sexual deviancy, which she calls lust.
The truth is that love and lust are not the same. The belief that love and lust are analogous is a soul-destroying distortion of reality. Lust actuates the moral decay of a human being, the objectification and betrayal of a person both physically and spiritually, and the abject denunciation and deprecation of a soul.
Her beliefs about the evils of sex and thinking everyone is an addict is rooted in Mormon doctrine. Most Christian religions are against premarital sex, but the Mormon church takes that a couple steps further. They are also vehemently against pornography and have their own definition of what exactly that is. On the church website it says, pornography is any material depicting or describing the human body or sexual conduct in a way that arouses sexual feelings. It is distributed through many media, including magazines, books, television, movies, music, and the internet. It is as harmful to the spirit as tobacco, alcohol, and drugs are to the body. Using pornographic material in any way is a violation of a commandment of God. Thou shalt not commit adultery or nor do anything like unto it. It can lead to other serious sins. Members of the church should avoid pornography in any form and should oppose its production, distribution, and use. In fact, if you're a teenage girl, aka a child, the way you dress can be considered pornography.
And young women, please understand that if you dress immodestly, you are magnifying this problem by becoming pornography to some of the men who see you.
This is one of the most disgusting things he has ever said, and he's said a lot of gross things. According to Oaks, the 12-year-old girl that he is talking to can be seen in a sexual way by a grown man, and that is the 12-year-old girl's fault. Fuck all the way off, you fucking fuck. That's called being a schmedophile. That is not a normal human man thought, you psychopath. This talk was from 2005, and it is absolutely still being taught in Sunday school today. I was taught this. I was taught lessons that if I was dressed a certain way, a boy was gonna go home and watch porn and that it was my fault. I found a lesson that is currently on the LDS Church's website directed towards children, and it's titled, What Should I Do If I See Pornography? And one of the bullet points is, call it what it is. Pornography, immodesty, sexualized media, act. Immodesty does not equal corn. If you sexualize anyone's body, that is on you, especially if it's a fucking child. The blame for men's actions is entirely put on not just the women, but little girls. Modesty is not taught to Mormon men. It doesn't apply to them. It's sick and wrong, and it perpetuates victim blaming and abuse within the church. I am not banning men from wearing tight suit pants to church because it forces me to think about their body and not Jesus. Having a body is not a sin, but according to the LDS Church, women don't have this problem Women don't get turned on. That's a myth. And they especially don't look at corn. So every talk about corn is always directed towards the men. Every talk towards women is about how they can help fight pornography by not dressing like sluts. The church loves talking about this so much that over the past 5 years of LDS General Conference, I found 14 separate talks mentioning the word pornography. And since there's 2 conferences per year, that's an average of 2 to 3 times every General Conference, which little kids are watching. Sometimes that's what their entire talk is about, like Oaks' talk. It's the don't think about an elephant fallacy. If you're constantly telling someone to not think about an elephant, and elephants are evil, and never look up pictures of elephants because they'll destroy your brain, you're gonna be curious about what the heck an elephant is. In fact, according to a 2009 study by a Harvard professor, Utah was the #1 state for corn usage. And the more religious and conservative a state is, the more likely the state was to consume explicit adult content. 9 out of the 12 states from the Bible Belt are the top 10 corn consumers. It's almost like Christians and Mormons are creating a problem that was not there to begin with. What you choose to watch is up to your discretion. It's fine if it's not your cup of tea, but there's not anything inherently evil about it, and it doesn't lead you down a slippery slope of committing horrible crimes. I don't know which serial killer it was, but they asked him what made him start killing people, and he said it was looking at corn. I feel like I heard that story told to me in church so often. They literally connect the dots from consensual sex to murder, because any sexual sin is next to murder. It's the fear-mongering around this type of content that really fuels the fire for people to watch it in the first place. And if you watch it, you'll be addicted and you'll ruin your life, at least according to the church. The definition on the church website says pornography is tragically addictive. Like other addictions, it leads people to experiment and to seek more powerful stimulations. If you experiment with it and allow yourself to remain caught in its trap, it will destroy you, degrading your mind, heart, and spirit. It will rob you of self-respect and of your sense of the beauties of life. It will tear you down and lead you to evil thoughts and possibly evil actions. It will cause terrible damage to your family relationships. Corn addiction, just like sex addiction, is not in the DSM-5 either, but you can be addicted to literally anything. If you've ever watched TLC, people are addicted to eating laundry detergent and cat hair. It's not because detergent or cats are inherently evil. Addicts have underlying issues that need to be resolved in therapy, but the church thinks that if you do anything more than once, you are an addict. You know how I know? Because I was told by my LDS therapist that I was an alcoholic and a sex addict. And yes, I attended the LDS addiction recovery program for over a year. Here's my notes. On the front it says, written with support from church leaders and counseling professionals by those who have suffered from addiction and who have experienced the miracle of recovery through the atonement of Jesus Christ. It's published by LDS Family Services, so it does not name who these counseling professionals were, so Jodi could have been involved, or just lied about it for clout, and we'll never really know. Also, the LDS Addiction Recovery Program is completely stolen from Alcoholics Anonymous, just with LDS doctrine added to it. The Addiction Recovery Program has adapted the original 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous World Services into a framework of the doctrines, principles, and beliefs of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Every step in the 12 steps program is the same in the LDS recovery program. It's just worded slightly differently and says the word God and Jesus more. Now, this is not a bad program in itself for addicts. Problem was, I wasn't an addict. And now I question whether everyone in that room was or not. Some people would sit there and say, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I am addicted to masturbation, and I messed up and I masturbated today. And I was like, bitch, me too, the fuck? Masturbation addiction because you do it once a day? Not a thing. But if I ever told my therapist that I wasn't a sex addict, he would tell me that's the addiction talking. And listening to Jodi's victims and listening to clips of her talking, she was spewing this same rhetoric. And if you disagreed with her, that was the distortion talking. Now, as to what truth and distortion mean, I'm still figuring that out.
And we can choose to perceive those experiences in truth or in distortion.
You're either going to choose truth or you will default into distortion. So we can't say this enough. If you're not deliberately choosing truth, you will default into distortion. Because once you understand truth, then you'll hear the black and white thinking, you'll see and hear the distortion, and you'll confront the distortion.
Your child is experiencing anxiety, and that is a message to you that your child is starving for truth. Truth will not hurt your child. Truth will bring your child into the light.
And distorted anger is there to destroy, to attack, to defame, to exploit, to abuse. It has nothing but destruction attached to it. Whereas truthful anger is about creating and becoming closer to God, actually. and using it for protection and using it for clarity so you can see, and you can see with your heart.
And the plants, math, photography, biology, physics, everything has principles, and they just function inside those principles. And we are governed by principles, but we get to choose if we're going to be governed by principles of truth or if we're going to be governed by principles of distortion.
If you bring a distorted principle into any realm, it violates the principles of truth. So you no longer will have this movement that naturally moved in truth. You will contaminate it. You will create a counterfeit. And it may look the same. However, it will not have a base of truth. And so at some point it is going to start decomposing. It's going to start breaking down. It's going to die.
You'll see it in the fruits, quite literally. Because my kids were being hurt. With entitlement, they were being hurt. With people's advice, and they didn't have a mother up the front saying, I don't care what the world's opinion is. This is the truth, and this is where I stand. They're seeing truth, they're accepting truth, they're loving truth. And so this is my passion, is to invite you to stand in truth and put your opinions to the side for a minute. Because your kids are the target of distortion.
I have dedicated my life to truth. And truth has been hated since the beginning of time. Since Adam and Eve, truth has been hated. So it doesn't surprise me that distortion is attacking truth. And those of you who have been mean and aggressive and hateful in your comments, you are the reason why there's so much distortion in the world, because you keep perpetuating it.
Basically, if you agree with Jodi, you're living in truth. And if you disagreed with her, you're living in distortion, which is how the Mormon church functions. They tell you what their truth is. And if you agree, you are living in righteousness and you're listening to the Spirit. And if you disagree, you are living in sin and you are listening to Satan. The church calls itself the only true church on the earth, and therefore its prophets and church leaders are the arbiters of truth. So as creepy as it is to hear Jodi and Ruby talk about truth so much, it's nothing I haven't heard before. I was just used to hearing it in a church setting. In an LDS conference talk titled Deceive Me Not, ironic, by Gary Stevenson, he says, however, many today grapple with these same issues on a much larger scale. They are either unable to see the things as they truly are or are unsatisfied with truth. There are forces at play today designed to deliberately lead us away from absolute truth. These deceptions and lies go far beyond innocent mistaken identity and often have dire, not minor consequences. Satan, the father of lies and the great deceiver, would have us question things as they really are and either ignore eternal truths or replace them with something that appears more pleasing. He maketh war with the saints of God and has spent millennia calculating and practicing the ability to persuade God's children to believe that good is evil and evil is good. If his babbling sounds like a word salad to you, it's because it is. But this is what was shoved into my brain over and over and over again when I was Mormon. There is a spiritual war going on. No one knows about it but us. That's why we need to go tell people about it, because we are the good guys. We are on the winning side. We have the truth, and anyone who says we don't is on Satan's side, and they have been lied to and deceived. If you tell a member of a cult or a high-demand religion that they have been lied to and that you have the facts to prove it, they will say, no, actually, you're lying. But instead of facts, it's just their feelings. They just feel that it's true. The church teaches this. Jodi taught this. She taught what she believed to be truth because it felt real to her, much like Joseph Smith when he decided that grooming young girls was okay because he decided it was okay. That is called circular reasoning, like I mentioned Ruby doing before, and it's an argument that goes back to its origins without having proven anything. It's a because I said so argument. It's the Bible is true because the Bible says it's true. The Book of Mormon is true because the Book of Mormon says it's true. It's what I say is truth because truth is truth. There, I just crammed 8 hours worth of general conference into 3 sentences. So Jodi creates connections based on her own interpretation of what she calls truth and distortion, which relies heavily on her feelings and nothing psychological or textbook. She also creates her own version of a sexual addiction program, and we already know that Adam had a horrible experience, but what about the other clients? Here is one of the many negative reviews I found of Jodi's program. The following are some of what I see as the fruits of meeting with Jodi. Many of the men develop paralyzing fears of lust, of being irresponsible, and of Jodi herself. This is compounded by Jodi questioning their wives about how long they are going to put up with such behavior. The women develop fears of not doing it right or in truth, fear of what other women in group or Jodi will say about their behavior, and fear of enabling. Men are frequently booted from their homes by their wives in the spirit of not enabling lust or victim. LDS bishops are rebuked by women who believe they are enabling their husbands and living in lust themselves. Another major fruit is divorce. 10 couples I have come to know personally divorced after therapy therapy with Jodi. Separating couples and families is one of Jodi's favorite tactics, as we saw with Adam Steed and also Kevin Franke, as moving out of his own home and not seeing his kids was allegedly all under Jodi's direction. Also, not being worthy enough to be around your family is also a Mormon doctrine, as they teach that I, a person living in sin, will not be with my family forever because of my choices. Not because Heavenly Father wants you to be separated from your family forever, because that's what you chose to do. Another review reads, "She is not worthy to be trusted with your marriage or relationships. My wife went to her for counseling and classes, and the main result was that Miss Hildebrandt brainwashed my wife that I had an addiction when I did not. My wife was so certain that I was hiding something as a result of this woman's lies that we had to go to an honest counselor to help dispel this dishonesty that this woman had told my wife. Do not go to this woman. Go to a specialist who is not a misandrist, who respects both members of the marriage and does not spread so-called empowering lies." Jodi implanting false accusations into her clients' brains is another one of her favorite tactics, as we saw with both Jesse and Adam Steed. What Jodi is doing with these manipulation tactics is, in my opinion, projection. She had been married before and may have had trauma from that, so because she believes that her ex was dishonest, she convinced these women that their husbands were all lying to their wives and they had these secret addictions that they weren't admitting to. And eventually she got the women to believe her over their own husbands, which ended up destroying a lot of marriages. And I'm no expert, but I don't think that's what marriage counseling is supposed to do. Yes, some couples should not be together and split up after counseling, but not this many, damn. And I think she got joy out of this. I'm not trying to pull the, oh, she was just sad because she was single. I genuinely believe she has unresolved trauma, and this was her way of coping with it, by making other people suffer the same things that she suffered. And allegedly, some of this projection also comes from the rumor that Jodi may have been queer herself.
She said something to the effect of, yes, being gay is evil and, you know, pleasures of the flesh and yada yada. But if I were to have sexual relationships with my friends, if we were to, like, it would be different because there's a deep emotional connection there, and that's different. And like we were sitting in someone's living room and she said this, and I was just like, what? Yeah, that's called being gay. Like, what do you think gay relationships are like? They are emotional and deep and connective, and yeah.
In my opinion, I think she was very intentional about making everyone else as miserable as she was, and if she was queer, which we don't know that for a fact, her religion told her that was a sin, and that's a miserable feeling. Her own children weren't talking to her, so she was separated from her own family, and she wanted everyone else to be as well. And she was making a lot of money doing this. Not just through her counseling, but through her other coaching programs and books and bullshit that she was selling, as well as her and Ruby's YouTube channel. She saw all the success Ruby had on 8 Passengers and was like, I want that. The most infuriating thing about Jodi Hildebrandt's practice is it was all being funded by the Mormon Church.
I used to do her billing, and she would bill the church. And so, like, every client, essentially, I would say like the vast majority of her clients were from bishop recommendations.
So that's where my tithing money went. Lovely. Not only that, but she registered her business connections as a non-profit. So she was getting a tax break, which is fraud. That's fraud, Jodi. I hope they get her for that too. But she did learn from the best. What other non-profits do we know of that operate as businesses while under the guise of doing humanitarian aid? When people are screaming on the internet that this has nothing to do with Mormonism, they are wrong. The fact is, the church was giving her money, giving her clients, and asking her to speak at BYU women's conferences and state conferences and ward activities. But just like the church is now denouncing Tim Ballard and scrubbing all trace of him from their website, I'm sure they're already triple checking to make sure Jodi's name isn't showing up anywhere on there either. And if they're ever asked about it in the future, I'm sure they'll deny, like they do. They will use people until those people are no longer useful to them, or if they bring any negative attention to the church. It's not because of their morals, they just don't want the bad press. On a website called JodiHildebrandt.com, which has documented her current arrest as well as her previous predatory practices, there is an entire page titled, "Is Jodi Hildebrandt LDS?", which claims that her teachings are not in line with the LDS Church, and they give some examples. Jodi does not teach love, forgiveness, long-suffering, or patience. Instead, she teaches that unless everyone comes to her classes to learn how to have correct relationships, they are in distortion. They are addicted. codependent, and lost. She proclaims her teachings are truth. Jodi describes them as equivalent to gravity, absolute and irrevocable. She alone is able to help people find enlightenment and connection. She teaches her students to put up boundaries with their friends and family, which effectively cuts off everyone out of their lives that will not listen and learn of her doctrine. The LDS Church also teaches absolute truth, as I showed previously. And they also teach you to cut people out of your lives that do not agree with your beliefs.
Never take counsel from those who do not believe.
This is church doctrine. It's almost verbatim. The only difference is that Jodi crowned herself God instead of an LDS leader doing it. The only issue they really have is she didn't have the authority to teach what's truth because she doesn't have the priesthood or she's not a prophet. Prophets literally give themselves authority. It's the same fucking thing. In the Book of Mormon, it teaches against priestcraft, which is defined in 2 Nephi 26:29. He commanded that there should be no priestcrafts, for behold, priestcrafts are that men preach and set themselves up for a light unto the world, that they may get gain and praise of the world, but they seek not the welfare of Zion. Here's the thing. Jodi thought she was receiving revelation straight from Jesus. Joseph Smith told people that he was receiving revelation from God, and they trusted him. Jodi told people she was receiving revelation from God, and they trusted her. Gaining people's trust is the key to being a good cult leader. The only difference is that people are now able to see past Jodi's bullshit because of this arrest and corroborating evidence, and they can't see through Joseph's because, well, he's dead, and we only have a lot of corroborating evidence and an arrest and historical documents that say he was also full of shit, but that's not enough for some people. Jodi believed that the Holy Ghost was telling her things that she had no evidence for, so she either needed to believe that her feelings were incorrect, which then sends her into a cognitive dissonance spiral, or believe that she is correct because she's living righteously and has access to the Spirit, and the other person must be in denial. In fact, her final blow to Ruby's kids before they were taken away was telling police officers they could not be around other children. Ruby repeated this in court, claiming that her son had confessed to the SA of his own sibling and many other kids. Now, there is a 99% chance this was a false confession because, like we saw with Jesse and Adam Steed, Jodi would coerce confessions out of people, and Jesse said that they did that just to get the abuse to stop, which is a common theme in false confessions in general. On the 1% chance that it's true, that's obviously not how you go about treating it. And Ruby claims that her son had been watching corn since he was 3. I teach 5-year-olds and they don't know how to type yet. Toddlers being corn addicts is not a thing. And as we've seen, her definition of corn is very different. It might have been a JCPenney catalog where a girl's shoulders were showing. And then Jodi, in her delusion, told Ruby that all of this was for sure happening, her son was lying, and Ruby trusted Jodi over her own son.
This is what love sounds like. When you see someone hurting, you acknowledge the hurt. If your kid came to you on fire, would you say, "I'm so glad you trusted me to tell me you're on fire, but if I put out the fire, that's gonna really hurt and you're gonna end up with scabs anyway, so I'm just gonna love you where you are right now"? No, you throw them on the ground and you start rolling them. You get a blanket and you start hitting the flames, and they're gonna say, "You're hurting me, you're beating me, you're controlling." It's like, no dear, hold still, I'm getting the fire out. That's what a loving parent does. And because nobody will do it, it looks to the world crazy. And because they've never been loved before, it looks like I'm angry. To them, it looks like I'm controlling. It looks like I'm militant. It looks like I'm a monster. It looks like I'm mean. It looks like I'm full of hate. It looks like I'm not accepting it because they don't know what love looks like or sounds like.
Everything is creepier in hindsight with Ruby, but I'm assuming this is what she told herself she was doing while her poor kids were being tortured by her and Jodi. It was all to get the sin out, to get the evil out, like a Mormon exorcism. Every extreme belief that Ruby and Jodi have is no different than what is being taught every Sunday over the pulpit at Mormon church. The black and white thinking, the persecution complex, the cult language. It's almost like cults beget cult leaders. others. What I'm trying to say is, when you have been abused either systemically in an organization or by family members or a relationship, you are more susceptible to being in an abusive relationship in the future or perpetuating it. People like to claim that Jodi was the mastermind and that Ruby got worse after meeting her, which might be true, but I don't want to take accountability away from Ruby or her husband Kevin. These beliefs were ingrained into them long before they met Jodi, and they were able to justify everything they did with church doctrine. I'm just gonna end this by quoting Voltaire, who said, "Anyone who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." That's the reason we keep getting the Lori Vallows and the Tim Ballards and the Jodi Hildebrandts. High demand religions and cults allow this behavior to thrive until something terrible happens, and it's too late at that point. I don't know what the answer is other than I'd advise against being in a cult, number one. Number two is take care of your mental health, like with a real doctor and a real therapist that base their treatments in science and reality. But what do I know? Thank you for watching. If you want to support me and my channel, since I am not yet monetized, donate to my Venmo, which is linked below, or you can donate to my favorite thing on the internet, which is floodlit.org. I've mentioned them before. It is a database of over 500 plus documented cases of predators within the LDS Church. They now have shirts, which are super soft. I have one. It's dirty and it's in the laundry, but all the proceeds go to them. They are a non-profit, and they use these funds to access records and court documents and to maintain the website that the database is on. I volunteer with them, and none of us make any money doing so. We all have jobs and lives, and Floodlit is working on some really cool things coming up. The person who created it wishes to remain private, as they have seen how vindictive the LDS Church can be to anyone who speaks up against it. And no, it's not secretly me. This isn't a Gossip Girl thing. I wish I was cool enough and smart enough to come up with something like that, but I'm just a girl with a big mouth, and I want to help them out. Stay in distortion, guys. It's kind of lit out here. Let me get Trixie and Rexy. Say bye, Trixie, Rexy. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.